Photosynthesis. Humans cannot do photosynthesis. Can a bird do photosynthesis?
Yes.
No.
Can a plant
Yes.
do it?
Sure.
Can algae do it?
Yes.
Can cyanobacteria do it?
Yes.
Very good. So the sun's energy is free. We simply have to put it to use. That's why plants are very good, because they use the sun's energy to make food. We have to eat the plants to get our food. If you eat meat, that sheep or cow or chicken at some point had to eat a plant to be alive. So everything in the end goes back to plants. If plants die one day, everything will die. That's what happened to dinosaurs, right? Because all the plants died because of the... You can fill in, Fadi. Go ahead.
So basically, like the sun blocked away like most of the sunlight, and like plants started to die, and dinosaurs had nothing to eat, and like the herbivores had nothing to eat, and then they started to die too, and the carnivores also didn't have anything to eat.
He's right.
يعني nothing at all. No one had.
No. Do you know who lived? Things that like eat once a month. Or let's say things that live in the sea, like a fish maybe. A cockroach maybe. Maybe
They
some
eat
insects.
Those stuff that stayed alive. Cockroach.
Most things died.
You just said some of the stuff were alive.
Yeah, I said most things died and some remained alive. Some as like the minority. Anyways, now, to do photosynthesis, if you're a eukaryote, you must use the chloroplast. The chloroplast is able to turn sunlight to chemical energy. But of course, it cannot do it alone. It must also use the CO2 that's in the air and the water that's in the soil. Okay? And of course, don't forget the history of the chloroplast. It was at some point its own independent prokaryotic cell at some point before it was engulfed by a bigger prokaryote and they made a deal to live with each other. Okay? So, chloroplasts are going to be the place where photosynthesis takes place. Now, of course, a plant has to take in CO2 to do photosynthesis. It does so through small pores in the leaves. Those pores are called stomata. Okay? So, a chloroplast is made of two components, the stroma, which is the fluid, and thylakoids, which look like coins, basically. And of course, you must have chlorophyll, which is why they look green in the first place. Chlorophyll is the pigment that allows those plants to absorb sunlight. This is the reaction that takes place during photosynthesis. You must have CO2, water, and also light energy to give you glucose, O2, and some water as well. And it can be simplified to only this reaction here, basically. Okay? So glucose is going to be the product of photosynthesis. Now, during photosynthesis, water gets split. Water gets split by light energy. Okay? When light hits the water, it will get split. Okay? It will get split to what and what? To O2, to electrons, and also to hydrogen ions. These are the products of water splitting under the exposure of sunlight. Okay, now it's time to compare the two stages of photosynthesis, which both occur in the chloroplast, where one of them is called light dependent reaction and one is called light independent reaction. So, the first stage of photosynthesis is the light-dependent reaction. In the first stage, what happens is the water gets split by light into hydrogen ions, O2 gas, and also electrons. Also, during this stage, we will have the electron transport chain, and it takes its electrons from two places. Electrons from the water, and also electrons from the chlorophyll after they get excited in the chlorophyll. And of course, we're going to be having NADP positive acting as the final electron acceptor and becoming NADPH. So if you guys recall back in the mitochondria, O2 was the final electron acceptor. Now it's going to be NADP positive that will act as the final electron acceptor. And also during this stage, following the electron transport chain, we're going to be having chemiosmosis, which, just like the case of the mitochondria, that's where the ATP is made by ATP synthase. So essentially, chloroplast, just like the mitochondria, also makes ATP. This drawing here compares for you the mitochondria and the chloroplast. So they both have electron transport chain, but one is happening on the inner mitochondrial membrane in the case of the mitochondria versus the thylakoid membrane in the case of the chloroplast. In one of them, we have the intermembrane space, and the other one is going to have the thylakoid space. They both serve the same purpose. That's where the H plus will accumulate. And that's where the H plus will form something called the proton gradient, which basically means that the H plus will not have to move back to, if it's the mitochondria, it's the matrix. If it's the chloroplast, it's the stroma. And the movement of this H plus through this enzyme ATP synthase allows it to make ATP. So here we see how both mitochondria and chloroplast have many things in common. They both have electron transport chain. They both have H plus that's stacking up in the space. And they also both have ATP being made in the end. Now, so far, the light reactions have been occurring on the thylakoid membrane, which has two photosystems, which are basically places that can absorb light. They're called photosystem II and also photosystem I. The order is important. So photosystem II absorbs light first before photosystem I does that. Okay. Now, if you guys come across something like P680, that basically means the photosystem that absorbs the light of the wavelength 680 nanometers. But then if you come across P700, that basically means the photosystem that absorbs light at 700 nanometers. So those two photosystems will essentially absorb light at different wavelengths from each other. And they're both found in the thylakoid membrane, which is part of the light-dependent reactions, the first stage of photosynthesis. Now, there is no glucose made in light-dependent reactions. Zero glucose is made there, okay? But the products of light-dependent reactions of the ATP and the NADPH will then be used to fuel the light independent reactions. They will fuel them. In those reactions, okay, basically CO2 will be taken out of the air. It will be combined with ATP and also NADPH to make you a glucose, a sugar basically. This process is called the Calvin cycle. And the enzyme responsible for carrying out the Calvin cycle is called rubisco. Rubisco. Here we have the summary of the entire thing. As we can see, this whole process of photosynthesis is taking place inside the chloroplast, with the first stage taking place in the thylakoid, with light being there along with water. So light and water must both be there, and you will make ATP, NADPH, and also O2. O2 will leave the plant through the stroma. Now ATP and NADPH will be used to make the Calvin cycle, which is the second stage, occur, which will then make you a sugar. And this Calvin cycle takes place in the stroma, and of course has to have CO2 going through this cycle. Now, turning the CO2 into something bigger, a glucose, is called carbon fixation, and carbon fixation takes place in the Calvin cycle. Turning CO2 into a bigger thing, that's called reduction. In biology, reduction means building something into a bigger thing, basically. And of course, the Calvin cycle can only occur as long as you have a good supply of NADPH and ATP from the light-dependent reactions. Chlorophyll could exist as two different components or two different pigments, chlorophyll A and also chlorophyll B. Now, they're different because they absorb different wavelengths of light. Whatever the peak is the maximum absorption of light. So, for example, the peak of chlorophyll A occurs at this color, which is purplish. But the peak for chlorophyll B occurs at this color, which is bluish. And carotenoids are going to be found in vegetables like carrots. They have different peaks, such as this color here, which is bluish, and also this color here, which is purplish. So the peak is the place of the maximum absorbance. Now, do we have other peaks here for the chlorophyll A? It has this peak here and this peak here. That means a plant would like two colors, reddish or oranges, and orangish, and also purplish, basically. Okay. Now look at how when it's green, there is no peak. That basically means that if you give a plant a green color only, it's going to die. Plants don't use the green part of the light because they look green. That means they reflect it back to your eyes. I want you to keep in mind that the photosystems II and I, they both appear in the thylakoid membrane, which is part of the light-dependent reaction. What they do is they absorb light. If you see photon, that basically means light. If it's happening in the chlorophyll, that basically means the electrons will get excited out of the chlorophyll and they will go to the electron transport chain. Now, if both photosystems are put to use, 2 and then 1, then you will make ATP along with NADPH. But in some plants, they only have one photosystem put to use. That means they will only make one of those two things, not both of them. So if the plant only has photosystem 1, it will only make you ATP. Some plants have that. They can only make ATP in the light-dependent reactions, not NADPH.